The thing about the Arctic is that it teaches you early. It teaches you that silence is not peace, that stillness is not safety, and that anything which does not belong to the cold will eventually be found by it. Micah Akiruk learned this when she was 6 years old. The winter, her father took her out onto the sea ice before dawn and made her stand still for 40 minutes in the dark until she could hear the difference between wind that was just wind and wind that was carrying something. She didn't know at the time what she was being trained for. She thought it was a lesson in patience. It was, in a way. But her father, who was a quiet man with large hands and a way of watching the horizon that made you feel something was always about to arrive, was teaching her something older than patience. He was teaching her to notice what didn't fit. Pangnertung sat at the mouth of a fjord so beautiful it looked unreal even to the people who lived there. In summer, the sun hung low and gold for most of the day and night, and the mountains turned colors that had no names in English. The hamlet was small, a few hundred people, a scattering of brightly painted houses along the shore, snowmobiles parked outside every door from September to June. The supply ship came twice a year. The satellite dish on the community center roof was the most expensive object in town, and the teenagers gathered around its signal like moths around a flame, faces blue-lit by screens, furiously scrolling through a world they could see but couldn't touch. Micah was 17. She wore her hair in 2 braids that were usually half undone by mid-morning, and she had her father's horizon-watching eyes, dark, patient, always slightly focused on something no one else was looking at. She was not the kind of girl who got into trouble on purpose, but she had a specific gravity that trouble found attractive. Her friends were Lena, who was quick-tongued and faster with a comeback than most adults were, with a complete thought. Jessie, who was the only one of them who actually liked school, and kept that fact mostly secret, and Aju, who was 12 and Micah's little sister, and who followed them everywhere with the absolute confidence of someone who has never been told no in a way that stuck. It was the long gold afternoon of a late August day when it started, though none of them knew it at the time. They had borrowed. The word borrowed was doing significant work in this sentence. Their uncle's aluminum skiff, and taken it across the bay to the forbidden side, the stretch of land that sat beneath the north face of the mountains, where the adults went to hunt in season, and where teenagers were specifically and firmly told not to go without supervision. The prohibition had the precise effect prohibitions always have on 17-year-olds. They had packed sandwiches and taken the rifle Micah's father kept in the hall closet, and they had gone anyway. The land on the other side smelled different. This was the first thing Micah noticed as they dragged the skiff up onto the gravel shore. Something underneath the cold smell of the water and the clean smell of the tundra. Something she had no word for. Not rot, not chemical. Something older than both. She almost said something. Then Aju spotted the Arctic hare and pointed, and they all looked at it, and the smell faded from her attention the way smells do when you stop focusing on them. The hare sat at the edge of the low scrub, watching them with eyes that were too calm. Micah noticed that its ears were not moving, which was wrong. Hares always move their ears, reading the air. But before she could think about it properly, the polar bear came out of the rocks above the shore. It was a big male, 250 kilos at least, and it moved with the terrible fluid ease of something that has never in its life been afraid of anything. It was between them and the boat. It was looking at Aju. What happened next took about 3 seconds. Micah brought the rifle up, found the sight, and shot the bear in the shoulder. The bear swung toward her. She shot it again, center mass. It dropped. In the silence afterward, Aju was crying. Not loudly, she was an Akiaruk, and they didn't cry loudly. But her hands were shaking and there were tears on her face. Micah crossed the gravel and put her arms around her sister and stood there while the others started moving. Checking the boat, checking each other. She didn't notice that some of the bear's blood had landed on Aju's jacket. She noticed later that the bear didn't smell right. Bears smelled like fish and wet fur in the cold. This one smelled like whatever she had caught on the air when they first landed. That deep foreign wrongness. But they were already pulling the boat back into the water. And Aju was already asking if they could stop at the store for chips on the way home. And Micah filed it somewhere in the back of her mind and moved on. That night, the first of the adults disappeared. His name was Peter Otuva, and he was the kind of man who was always visible in a small community. He drove the community trucks and fixed snowmobile engines, and had a laugh you could hear from 2 houses away. He walked home from the community center at 9 o'clock in the warm evening light, and was not seen again. His boots were found by the shoreline, standing upright, undisturbed. Micah heard about it the next morning when Lena texted her at 7 a.m. Just the words "he's gone" with no punctuation, which was how Lena conveyed maximum alarm. Micah lay in bed looking at her phone for a long moment. She thought about the smell. She thought about the bear's eyes, which she had not mentioned to anyone. How they had looked at Aju, tracking her specifically in a way that animals do not look at children. She got up. The adults were doing what adults in small communities do when something frightening happens. Gathering in the community center, making coffee, speculating carefully in low voices that wouldn't alarm the children, while all the children stood in the hallway listening. RSMP had been contacted, which meant someone would be here in a day, maybe two. The search teams were organizing. Everything was orderly and purposeful and completely inadequate, though no one knew that yet. Micah found Jessie outside, sitting on the community center steps with her knees pulled to her chest. Something came in on that side of the bay, Micah said. Jessie looked at her. You don't know that. The bear was wrong. Bears don't just disappear people, Micah. The bear was wrong, Micah said again, because she didn't have better words yet. Its eyes, and it smelled wrong. And those boot tracks that Tommy found by the shore weren't from Peter walking into the water. They were from something dragging him. Jessie was quiet for a moment. She was the one who read, who researched, who needed evidence, arranged in a logical sequence before she would believe anything. But she had also grown up here, in this landscape that did not lie, and she had her own relationship with the wrongness of things. What are you going to do? She asked. Micah looked out across the bay to the north side of the fjord. The mountains caught the morning light and the water was very still. Go back over there, she said. They told Aju she was absolutely not coming. Aju came anyway. This was so predictable that Micah had actually pre-argued it in her head on the way to the boat, and she still lost. There were 4 of them in the skiff again, crossing the flat water in the morning calm. Micah had the rifle. Lena had taken a hunting knife from her uncle's truck without asking, and had it tucked in her waistband, with the satisfaction of someone who had always wanted a justification for that. Jessie had her phone, not for social media for once, but because she was recording everything, moving it in a slow arc over the landscape, like a scientist, which in fairness she probably should have been. The smell hit them when they were still 20 meters from shore. Stronger now. It had rained overnight, and the rain had not washed it away but concentrated it, pushed it out of the ground, and it lay over the north bank of the fjord like a pressure change before a storm. You smell that? Lena said. Yes, said everyone. The skiff scraped gravel and they climbed out. Aju held Micah's sleeve without asking, and Micah let her. The bear was where they'd left it. But it wasn't right anymore. It was lying where it had fallen, but its body had changed texture. The fur along its spine had opened, not like a wound, not like rot, but like something emerging from beneath the skin. Thin filaments, the color of old ice, threading upward through the fur and branching. Like roots. Like the thing inside it was trying to grow. Okay, Jessie said very quietly. Okay, so, I know, Micah said. What is that? I don't know. Lena pulled out her phone and took a picture, which later Micah would think was either the bravest or the most absurd thing any of them did in the entire sequence of events. No service anyway, Lena said. But when we get back, if we get back, Aju said. You're not helping, Lena told her. They followed the tracks. The bear's tracks from the day before, and overlaid with them something else. Something that left marks that weren't quite footprints. More like pressure signatures, like something heavy moving, and then not being there, then being there again. The tracks led up from the shore toward the base of the mountain, where a long scree slope met an outcropping of dark rock. In the shadow of the rock there was a depression in the ground, roughly circular, maybe 5 meters across. The earth inside it had been scorched, not by fire, not by any heat that Micah knew. It was darker. The rock at the center had a quality of having been under extreme pressure. Around the edge, clove more of the films, growing up through the ground, moving so slowly that you couldn't see them move if you watched, but clearly changed if you looked away and looked back. Jessie crouched at the edge and held her phone over it. I think this is a landing site, she said, as if she were reading from a textbook on extraterrestrial impact geology. A what? Lena said. Something came down here. Not recently, I think maybe longer ago than yesterday, maybe weeks ago. It's been here for a while. Jessie stood up. Whatever got into that bear has been here for a while. Aju's hand tightened on Micah's sleeve. Behind them, something moved in the rocks above. The next hours were fear and running, and the cold application of what they knew, which turned out to be more than any of them would have predicted. The thing that had been the bear. And there was more than one of them now. The thing had been busy. It had gotten into two of the sled dogs that lived on the north side and into something else they couldn't identify. Something that moved below the water's surface when they ran back toward the boat. The thing was fast, and strong, and completely indifferent to pain in any form they could manage. Micah shot it twice more. It kept moving. The bullets went through and came out the other side, and the wounds filled in behind them, knit back together with a speed that was just barely too fast to watch. They made it to the boat. They made it across the water. Behind them at the waterline on the north shore, something stood and watched them go. "It's not following," Jesse said, watching the diminishing shape as they moved across the bay. "It can't swim," Lena said. "Or it doesn't want to." "Why doesn't it want to?" "Maybe this side already has something for it," Aju said, and everyone looked at her. She looked back at them. "I'm just saying, she was right." They found out she was right when they got back to the hamlet and went looking for Mr. Utuva and found instead what the alien that had taken Mr. Utuva had done with his body. This is where the fear became something else. Something harder and colder and more useful. Micah had felt this shift before on the ice, when the weather turned fast and you had maybe 4 minutes to find shelter. And you could either panic or become very practical. Every Arctic kid learned this transition at some point. You learned it or you didn't come home. She sat Aju down in the community center kitchen, put a mug of tea in her hands, and told her to stay. "No," Aju said. "Aju, you're going to need me," Aju said, with the absolute certainty of someone who has never been wrong about something important. "I'm the one it looked at. In the bear, it was looking at me. And whatever it's looking for, I think I know what that is." Micah looked at her sister for a long moment. Then she pulled up a chair and sat across from her. "Tell me," she said. What Aju had worked out, in the way 12-year-olds work things out, by ignoring the things adults would waste time on and going straight to the structural logic, was this. The thing targeted the bear because the bear was close. Then it targeted the others on the north shore because they were there. But it had looked at Aju specifically. Not at Micah, who was bigger and louder and held the gun. Not at the others, at Aju, and Aju's jacket had the bear's blood on it. "It tracks the blood," Aju said. "The black stuff in the bear. It was in the blood. And when the blood got on me, it—" She made a gesture with her hands that somehow conveyed the idea of a signal going out. "It tagged you," Jesse said, from the doorway where she'd been listening. "Yeah. So it's not trying to kill everyone," Jesse said slowly. "It's trying to find you." "I think so," Lena said. "I don't know." Aju took a slow sip of tea. "Maybe I'm like a test. Maybe the first time it gets a reading back it wants to know what made it. I don't know. I'm 12. I'm doing my best here." This, Micah thought, was the most useful single statement anyone had made in 12 hours. She looked at her friends, Lena with the hunting knife, Jessie still recording everything, Aju holding her tea with both hands, and watching Micah with the specific patience of someone waiting for their older sister to catch up. Outside, the community was going about its careful, frightened business. The RSEMP would be here tomorrow. The adults were out searching in teams. Nobody knew what they were searching for. "Okay," Micah said. "Here's what we have." What they had: 1 rifle, 4 shells, 2 hunting knives, a fish spear from the shed behind the community center, 2 lengths of rope, a pair of wire cutters Lena had inexplicably been carrying for 3 days, and knowledge. The knowledge was the important part. They had grown up here. They knew this land in the specific granular way that only people who have no choice but to know a place ever do. They knew where the ground gave way, where the ice didn't freeze properly in early season, where the cliffs met the water in angles that funneled the wind, where the ATV tracks were and where they led, where Peter Otuva's fishing hut stood at the head of the bay. The thing, whatever it was, had come from somewhere else. It could adjust to the bodies it took. It was good at that, impressively good, but it didn't know this place. Not really, not the way they knew it. "We use the land," Micah said. Lena pointed at the rifle. "We only have 4 shells, I know, so we make them count." The plan was simple in the way that good plans are simple, not because simple plans are always good, but because complex plans fall apart when you're scared and cold, and being chased by something that used to be a sled dog. They would use Aju as bait. They would bring it to the canyon at the head of the bay, where the cliffs came down to the water on 3 sides, and the only exit was back through the narrow cut in the rock that the locals called the door, and then they would close the door. Aju's face, when Micah explained the bait part, was a specific kind of 12-year-old face. The one that says, "I know this is right, and I don't like it, and I'm going to do it anyway." Micah recognized it because she'd made that face at their father approximately 40 times. Stay in front of me, Micah told her. The whole time, don't go past the rope markers. When you hear me whistle, you run left, not right, because Jesse's going to be on the right. I know left from right, Aju said. I know you do. I'm saying it anyway. They went out into the long gold evening, through the hamlet, past the community center where the adults were still gathered, past the shore where the RCMP boat would dock tomorrow morning, out along the gravel track that followed the bay to its head. The light was flat and perfect, and everything cast long shadows. Somewhere behind them, 3 houses away, something that was wearing old Sarah Ikaluk's face but wasn't looked out a window as they passed. Lena said very quietly, "It's already here." "I know," Mika said without turning around. "How many?" "3 that I can see, probably more." "Okay," Lena said, and that was all. You could not rattle Lena. This was possibly her most important quality. They kept walking. The canyon was 20 minutes from the edge of the hamlet, past the fishing huts, and the stretch of shore where the char ran in September. It was a slot in the landscape, red rock and gray shale, the walls coming up 50 feet on either side and narrowing at the top until the sky was a thin ribbon of gold. The floor was flat gravel, and at the far end the cliff met the water in a sheer drop of 30 feet. Jesse had gone ahead to get into position on the right side of the entrance. Lena went left. Micah and Aju walked down the center. "I'm scared," Aju said. "Yeah," Micah said. "Me too. Is that okay?" "It's the right feeling to have. It means you're paying attention." Aju was quiet for a moment. "Dad said that to you, didn't he?" "He said it to me the first time I had to cut the line when the ice was coming in fast." "Did it help?" "Not really," Micah said. "But I think I was supposed to remember it later." That's how his advice works. They were in the center of the canyon now, in the shadow of the eastern wall. Aju stopped and turned to face back the way they'd come. The entrance was a narrow cut of bright light 60 meters away. They waited. It came through the entrance in 3 shapes. The dog thing first, moving low to the ground, with a gait that was wrong, in the specific way that dreams are wrong. Each joint bending a fraction too early. Behind it, upright and wearing a body that was almost human, almost old Mrs. Utuva's husband, came the larger form. And behind that, half in shadow, something they hadn't seen before. Something that hadn't taken a local shape yet. Something that was still working out what to be, that shifted between suggestions of form, the way smoke shifts in a light wind. Aju made a small sound. Not a scream, too controlled for that, just acknowledgement. The dog thing tracked directly to her, moving with the absolute certainty of something following a signal. 60 meters 50, Micah had the rifle. She thought about her father, who had sat with her on the ice before dawn and taught her to hear what was wrong before she could see it. She thought about the 40 minutes of stillness. She thought about how the lesson she learned from that. Not patience, not attention, but something more specific. The knowledge that the thing which does not fit will always eventually make itself known. 40 meters, she whistled. Aju broke left. What happened in the next 90 seconds was the product of 4 girls who had grown up in a place that did not forgive mistakes, who had learned to read weather and ice, and the behavior of large and unpredictable animals, who knew the specific geography of this canyon because they had played in it as children, who understood that knowledge of a place was a kind of weapon that looked like nothing, and weighed nothing, and could not be taken from you. The rope went taut between the left wall and a protrusion of rock. The dog thing hit it at the knees and rolled, and when it rolled, Lena was there with the spear, driving it into the thing's central mass, pinning it to the ground the way you pin a tent stake, holding it while it thrashed, and its borrowed body tried to remember what shape it was supposed to be. The upright thing, the one wearing the human body, turned toward the sound of Lena struggling, and that was when Jesse dropped from the ledge above it, both feet, full weight on its shoulders, and they went down together. Jessie was not a large person, but she had the specific conviction of someone acting on 3 hours of planning, and she drove the thing into the gravel and sat on its back and put all of her weight into the wire cutters across the back of its neck, not knowing quite what she was cutting but cutting anyway. And the black fluid that was not blood, but was what blood would be, if blood wanted to get somewhere else, came up through the wounds in a slow, hot pulse. The fluid hit the gravel and kept moving toward Aju. "Run!" Micah shouted. Aju ran. She ran up the left wall on a ledge she knew was there, because she'd climbed it 100 times. 8 feet off the canyon floor, out of reach, and the fluid spread below her on the gravel and stopped. It needed a host. It couldn't be host to empty air. The third thing, the one that hadn't fully become anything, was still in the entrance. It had stopped. Micah turned to face it. In the flat gold light of the Arctic evening, with the rifle in her hands and the sound of the fight dying behind her, she looked at the thing that had come from somewhere so far away that the cold of space still clung to it. It was not precisely there. Its edges were uncertain. It was trying to work out what to be. "You came to the wrong place," she said. She wasn't being heroic. She wasn't making a speech. She was stating information, the way her father stated information, quietly and precisely, with complete certainty. She fired. The thing that had no shape yet had no armor yet, and the bullet found what she guessed was a center, some concentration of the black fluid that organized the whole, some node of the alien architecture, and the fluid went still. The edges of the thing blurred. The shape it was working toward collapsed. Around it, the fluid on the canyon floor went still too. The dog thing stopped moving. The human-shaped thing that Jesse was sitting on made a sound that wasn't a sound so much as a frequency, and then stopped. Lena pulled the spear free and looked at the dark mark on the gravel, and then at Micah. "Was that it?" she said. "I don't think so," Micah said. "I think that was the one that was in front. I think the others are still out there." "How many others?" Micah looked up. The thin ribbon of gold sky above the canyon was clean and clear, the mountains sharp against it. She thought about the landing site, one depression, one origin point. She thought about how the thing spread, host to host, and how each host was a new vector, and how long it had been before they noticed. "Enough," she said. "More than we can fight the same way twice. It'll learn." "So what do we do?" Micah thought. It took maybe 20 seconds, and for 20 seconds there was no sound in the canyon except the distant water and the wind coming down through the slot in the cliff above. What she kept coming back to was the blood. The black fluid that was blood, and was also signal, and was also something like a nervous system distributed through every host. The bear had been the first. It had spread from there. Every host was connected to the whole, which meant the whole could be addressed through any part. "It's networked," she said. Jessie looked up from where she was sitting on the now still form. "What?" "It's networked. All of it. It's not individual creatures. It's one thing in many places. Like a hive," Lena said. "Not quite. More like." Micah searched for the right word, a fishnet. "Every node connects to every other node. You cut one string, the net still holds. But if you find the right node—" "The central one," Jessie said. "Whatever it launched from. Whatever it arrived in." Jessie stood up slowly. "The landing site. They went back across the bay before dawn. All 4 of them, because trying to stop Aju had ceased to be a realistic ambition approximately 4 hours ago. The water was perfectly still in the early gray light, the mountains reflecting in it, and everything was so clean and quiet and immense that for a moment it was hard to believe anything had happened at all. That was the other thing the Arctic did. It absorbed events. It had seemed so much older and larger than any single catastrophe that it moved on quickly, closing over what had happened the way water closes over a stone. The North Shore smelled wrong, worse than before. Whatever had been in the landing site was aware now, or something in it was aware that it had lost contact with the fragments that had gone into the hamlet. It had pulled back, not retreated exactly, more organized itself. Micah could see, even in the gray light, that the ground around the depression had changed. More of the filaments, a wider ring, the scorched area at the center glowing faintly, with something that was not heat, but that her eyes reported as heat. "It's consolidating," Jessie said. "It knows we found it," Aju said. "It knows I'm here," Aju corrected. "The blood is still on my jacket. It's been tracking me since the bay. It thinks I'm bringing it something." She looked at Micah. "Aren't I?" Micah had thought about this on the water. She had sat in the bow of the skiff with the rifle across her knees and thought about it very carefully, the way her father thought about things. Turning them over, looking at the underside, not committing until she'd seen every face of the problem. The thing in the landing site was the origin. The fluid was the weapon, the vehicle, the method of colonization all at once. Every host it had taken on the North Shores was still connected to it, still feeding it information. It knew the shape of this land now through borrowed bodies, but it had never had a clear path to the center, to Aju, the tagged one, the signal sender, because they kept moving. If Aju stayed still long enough, it would converge on her. Every fragment, every host, everything it had scattered across the north side of the fjord would move toward that signal. And if all of it was in one place, one shell left. "Aju," she said. Aju said, "You know what I'm going to ask." "Yeah, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." Aju looked at her with their father's eyes, dark, patient, already looking at what came after this. "You're going to miss the shot if you're thinking about me." So I'm going to go stand over there and I'm going to be fine. And you're going to put that last shell exactly where it needs to go. And then we're going to go home and make bannock and not tell Mom any of this. You're 12 years old, Micah said. I know. I'm doing really well though. Lena made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Jessie was recording again, which somehow felt right. It should be witnessed. Someone should see this. Aju walked to the center of the depression, to the glowing scorched rock, and she stood there. Her jacket was old and faded, a hand-me-down with a small rip in the left sleeve, and against the gray light of the early morning and the cold unearthly glow of the landing site, she looked very small and very calm and entirely like their father. The things began to move. From the rocks above, from the shoreline left and right, from the water itself where something had been moving below the surface, they came. Every form the alien fluid had occupied, drawn in by the signal of the blood on Aju's jacket. They moved with the certainty of things following a message they didn't know how to disobey. Micah raised the rifle. Lena was at her left shoulder. Jessie was at her right. They were not going to be much use against whatever was coming, and they knew it, and they stayed anyway. The things converged on the center of the depression. On the glowing rock. On the signal that pulsed from the black fluid that had dried into the fabric of Aju's jacket. They piled into the depression, the dog things, the human-shaped things, the formless early-stage things, all of them. A mass of alien biology pooling toward the point of origin, the place they had come from, the node of the network. Aju looked at Micah across 20 meters of scorched earth and alien movement. Now, she said. The shot was to the rock, not to the creatures. To the glowing concentration at the center. The point where the energy of the landing still persisted, where the fluid was densest. When the bullet hit, there was a pause, a single moment of absolute stillness. Then the network went. Not an explosion, nothing so simple. The fluid lost its coherence all at once. Every fragment, every host, every scattered thread of the thing that had come from somewhere beyond the solar system and chosen this quiet Arctic fjord as its beach landing. It lost the organizing principle, the thing that made it more than chemistry, and without that, it was just chemistry. The hosts went still, the filaments stopped, the glow faded. In the distance, far out above the fjord, something moved upward through the early morning air. Something that had been waiting, the piece of the thing that had stayed near the sky, that was still uncaught, still organized enough to go. It moved very fast and then it was a point of light and then it was gone, not destroyed, but gone from here, gone from this sky, this land, this water, these people. Aju walked back across the depression to where Micah was standing. She handed Micah her jacket with the blood-stained sleeve. Burn this, she said. Micah took it. She looked at her sister, 12 years old, standing on the north side of a fjord in the early Arctic morning, alive and entirely herself. Yeah, she said, okay. Jessie was still recording. The camera panned slowly across the empty depression, the still forms of the former hosts, the vast indifferent mountains, the water. She paused it on Aju's face and then lowered the phone. Who do we tell, she said. It was a real question. RCMP would arrive this afternoon. The adults in the community would need to know that Peter Utuva was gone, that old Mrs. Ikaluk was gone, that the half-dozen other people who had been taken were not going to come back the way they went. The search teams would find what they found in the houses and along the shore, and there would be questions that had no answers that anyone would accept. We tell the truth, Micah said. Lena looked at her. All of it? All of it. We have the video. She looked at Jessie. You got all of it? Everything after the canyon. And the depression. The things moving. Then we show them. She looked across the bay toward the hamlet. The painted houses just visible in the growing morning light. It's our home. They'll figure it out. The boat ride back was quiet. The water was still picking up the early light, turning it gold, and the mountains stood exactly where they had always stood, and the birds were beginning. Normal birds. Ordinary birds, Lena noted, which was how you knew the air was clean. They tied the skiff to the dock and climbed up onto the gravel, and stood for a moment looking back at the north shore. Nothing moved over there. The wrongness in the air was gone. The smell was gone. The RCMP boat arrived at 2 in the afternoon, and the officers were very professional and very skeptical for about 4 minutes, which was how long it took Jessie to show them the video on her phone. After that, they were professional and not skeptical, and also clearly trying to figure out who to call. Your children, one of them said, not meanly, just trying to organize the facts. We know, Micah said. We live here. The officer looked at her for a long moment, then looked at the phone, then looked back at her. You 4 went over there alone. Yes, with 1 rifle. And 4 shells, Lena said helpfully. Technically, we only needed 3. The officer rubbed his face with both hands. It was the gesture of someone who had genuinely not prepared for this specific briefing. Okay, he said. Okay. Walk me through it again. Micah walked him through it again slowly, the way her father gave information, in order without embellishment, with all the facts attached to the right facts. The officer took notes. He stopped her twice to ask questions that she answered precisely. He did not interrupt a third time. Afterward, he sat in the community center with a cup of coffee going cold in front of him and a notebook full of things that were going to make the rest of his career very interesting. The thing that went up, he said. You think it's gone. I think it left, Micah said. Gone and left aren't necessarily the same thing. He looked at her. What's the difference? Left means it can come back. She held his gaze. You should probably tell someone who can do something about that. She went home in the early evening, through the hamlet, past the community center, and the satellite dish and the snowmobiles parked outside every door. The sky was still bright. It would be bright for hours yet, the way it always was here, the summer refusing to give up without a fight. Her mother was at the kitchen table when she came in, waiting with the specific stillness of a parent who has spent the day not knowing where their children were and has decided that what they feel about this will wait until later. Micah sat down across from her. We're fine, she said. Her mother looked at her for a long moment. She had the same dark, patient eyes, the same quality of watching the horizon. She reached across the table and took Micah's hands in both of hers and held them. Tell me, she said, so Micah told her. The whole thing start to finish, while the Arctic evening light came through the window and lay across the kitchen floor in long gold bars. When she was done, her mother sat with it for a while. Then she got up and went to the counter and started making bannock, because in this family, in this place, that was what you did with something that was too big for words. You made something with your hands. You made something that fed people. You kept going. Aju came in 20 minutes later and sat at the table and stole a piece of dough, which earned her a look from their mother that was only slightly softened by everything that had happened. She said, burn the jacket, Micah said. Not steal the dough. That's the bannock dough, Aju said, already chewing. Outside, the sun moved along the horizon without setting, and the fjord went flat and silver, and the mountains stood exactly where they had always stood, patient and enormous and entirely indifferent to what had tried to come in from the cold. In the community center, the RCMP officer was on his satellite phone, trying to explain something to someone who kept asking him to repeat himself. On the north side of the fjord, the landing site was dark and still, the filaments dry and dead, the glow gone. Above it all, the sky was very clear and very vast and full of distances that no one had measured. Somewhere out there something was calculating. But not tonight, not in this sky. Tonight, in a small, bright kitchen in the hamlet of Pangnertung, flour dusted the counter and bread was rising and a family was sitting together in the long gold light. And if you had asked any of them what had really happened, underneath all the terror and the gunshots and the alien biology and the cold hard thinking, they would have told you the same thing. They knew this place, and this place knew them. That was the only weapon that had ever mattered.